The late 1800s. America is on the brink of becoming the world's most advanced industrial superpower. 1869. This year marks the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, a transportation system fully revolutionizing America's cross-coast access and transforming industrial business. The year is 1873. Railroad overproduction and the lack of use collapses the American economy, closing the New York Stock Exchange for 10 devastating days as American businesses suffered bankruptcy, sending citizens into a nationwide panic. 1893. The United States has plunged into a depression as a result of a major run on the Treasury. Bankers fear the farmers' push for a silver standard. Later, panic again struck the nation for 6 weeks, the year 1907. These key events not only aided in the shaping of modern America, but were influenced by one great national leader. During the mid-19th to early 20th centuries, John Pierpont Morgan became an economic pioneer by introducing new banking strategies and methods, in addition to aiding the government during times of crisis. His impact on the economy is still seen today, especially throughout the lasting existence of his company, J.P. Morgan & Co. Although his father had connections that benefited J.P. Morgan to an extent, he undeniably developed a mind of his own and used his respectable European business education to set out and conquer the economic industry. He came fresh out of college and into the banking world in the 1860s. As a businessman, he wished to establish an orderly and prosperous community by using capitalism as well as speculation, which is to take a monetary risk on something whose value one hopes will rise quickly. He once purchased $2 million worth of gold bars and coins and shipped half to England. The U.S. gold supply lowered drastically, increasing the price. Then he brought the gold back to America, sold it, and consequently made an immense profit. Aside from speculation, Morgan was also interested in forming mergers, industries joining together to create one large company. This would limit competition between companies. For example, he is accredited with merging Edison Electric and Thomas Houston Co. to create General Electric, a company still prominent today. He also created U.S. Steel by buying Carnegie Steel and merging it with Federal Steel. Morgan was also very concerned with foreign investors, arguing that the economy would be gravely threatened if anything but a gold standard was used.
In 1873, the railroad saw its darkest days. There was too much track and not enough companies to use them. Slowly, the economy began to show signs of weakness. When J. Cook & Co., a major company that had invested in the Northern Pacific Railroad, went bankrupt, the economy began to steadily decline. People stopped investing in rail companies due to their economic instability. Soon, the New York Stock Exchange was forced to close for 10 days. As banks demanded a compensation for their loans, people sold their stocks at extremely low prices. As the chain of events continued to unfold, the companies lost money and were forced to fire a multitude of employees. Thus, the Panic of 1873 began. President Ulysses S. Grant was unable to help the banks with their financial strains, as there was no national bank. Morgan then heroically stepped in, loaning money to banking firms and persuading British investors to put money into the United States. A recurring conflict seen throughout history is that of the hostility between the affluent and the undistinguished man. This was reinvented in the new age of monopolies and railroads, as the investors and bankers were at odds with the farmers and the average man. Now, they fought over gold and silver standards. Foreign investors saw the dollar as weak and began to pull their funds out of the United States, exchanging paper for gold. The run on the Treasury began. Now the fear of others induced fear in all investors, both international and domestic. At the beginning of 1895, the Treasury, at a comfortable $100 million, collapsed rapidly and after only a month, held little over $45 million. JP saw this as a threat to his firm and headed down to Washington, requesting an audience with President Grover Cleveland. Due to J.P. Morgan's infamous reputation as the robber king of robber barons, the president was reluctant to accept help from the face of Wall Street, fearing it would look as if the government depended on big business in a crisis situation, and the president would be perceived as a puppet. However, Cleveland knew JP was their only hope to save the Treasury and evade economic failure. Morgan knew the Treasury was down to an inconceivable $9 million. Morgan saved the Treasury by giving the government $60 million in exchange for the private selling of gold bonds to his syndicate, who had to promise to keep the gold in the country until the issue blew over. The economy was safe, for now. It has been said that what goes up must come down. This is exactly what happened in 1907 when America experienced a downfall. It was triggered by a failed speculation, followed by the bankruptcy of two brokerage firms. Although the panic lasted only 6 weeks, the effects were infinite. The municipal government of New York teetered on the edge of bankruptcy as money became scarce and the Dow Jones fell 37%. Brokerages were forced to close their doors, along with the failure of 17 trust companies and 25 banks. As the economy continued its downward spiral of debt, Morgan devised a plan to aid the government. He, along with a select few of his peers, raised funds to relieve the nation's credit debt and help failing companies. He was able to accomplish this act in just a few weeks by using his personal influence among other leading financiers. It has been quoted that the significance of Morgan's leadership is undeniable, and that his actions deserve continued consideration as scholars and practitioners draw innumerable lessons from his temerity, judgment, and resolve. 1871, New York City. A deal is made that will evolve the financial world into a modern and efficient style of banking. J.P. Morgan and Anthony Drexel, a banker of Philadelphia, established a partnership creating Drexel Morgan & Company. This corporation soon stood out as the nation's leading private bank in both domestic and foreign affairs. His banking firm quickly became associated with the railroad industry as Morgan began to specialize in aiding financially troubled railroads. His method to solving their economic problems was decreasing their expenses, restructuring their debts, and placing their stocks in trusts so they could be managed by experts. This process was deemed Morganization, and it is widely believed today that Morgan himself played an integral role in developing much of the railroads in the United States.
One of Morgan's major victories was the rescue of A&S. This is commonly referred to as the Railroad War, and occurred when Jay Gould and James Fisk set out to gain control of the company. Taking swift action, Morgan, a natural leader, stepped in to loan money as well as lease the organization to another railroad company, keeping it safe and out of the hands of Gould and Fisk. As a result, he was given the position of vice president of the company. An 1873 New York Times article claimed that the rescue made Mr. Morgan universally regarded as an able financier. 1800. The rail business is booming. 70,000 miles of track rested across the United States. Morgan practically had the entire railroad empire under his belt. He took notice when New York Central Railroad and Pennsylvania Railroad were repeatedly lowering their prices. He wanted to keep profits high. Calling a meeting of representatives of both companies to his personal yacht, they came to an agreement. Today, J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. is a leading global financial services firm and one of the largest banking institutions in the United States. With history dating back over 200 years, it has grown to become internationally acknowledged, with banks in over 60 countries. J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. employs 260,000 qualified professionals and possesses over $2.4 trillion in assets. J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. is the modern embodiment of J.P. Morgan's financial empire that has revolutionized the way the world banks today.
Morgan, he helped create a financial structure that we're basically still living with. I mean, he didn't set up the Federal Reserve, but his actions did show people how much we needed a government agency that would be able to exert this kind of power and have influence to monitor the economy.
Although JP was seen as an intimidating and powerful man who was revered by many as an economic savior, this is shown in the response of the nation to his death in 1913. The New York Stock Exchange closed for a day in honor of the great economic pioneer. During the mid-19th to early 20th centuries, John Pierpont Morgan became an economic pioneer by introducing new banking strategies and methods, in addition to aiding the government during times of crisis. His impact on the economy is still seen today, especially throughout the lasting existence of his company, J.P. Morgan & Co. John Pierpont Morgan, economic savior and banking revolutionist.